Dennis Dunaway from the original Alice Cooper band. Welcome to Australian Musician.
Ah, thanks for having me.
At some point, we're hoping that Michael Bruce might join us, but if not, we'll just continue. For the first time in over 50 years, the original Alice Cooper group has reunited to release a brand new album, The Revenge of Alice Cooper, set for release on July 25. Was this something that had been discussed for a long time? What was the spark that lit this flame?
No, it's been sort of step by step getting there over the years. In more recent years, we've been doing Alice's Solid Rock Teen Center benefits out in Phoenix, Arizona, which is an organization that Alice and his wife Cheryl are a big part of. And so we've been doing those once a year or once every few years. And that brought the band back together. And then we were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we got together to rehearse and perform there. And then I wrote a book, Snakes, Guillotines, Electric Chairs, My Adventures in the Alice Cooper Group, which we did a book signing in Dallas. And that was filmed and an album came out mixed by Bob Ezrin, so that brought us closer together. So all of these things, step by step, Alice had us sit in our we donated songs to Alice's solo albums, Welcome to My Nightmare, Paranormal, and Detroit Stories. But I think the final straw was Neal is a snowbird. He goes from the New York City area out to Phoenix, Arizona for the winters, and Michael Bruce has his studio out there, and they would get together and kick around song ideas and everything. And then when Alice was in town, he'd join them, and they came up with some songs that they were pretty excited about. And then I got a call from Bob and Alice saying, "Hey, Dennis, you want to do an album?" I'm like, "Yeah." For the last 52 years, hello.
Yeah.
So it and that was like 4 years ago that
Mm,
that happened.
yeah.
So it's been a long time coming since it's been decided, but it wasn't a long time coming leading up to that. It was kind of like the phone call came and then it was on. So that's how it works.
Yeah. So coming back together, was it just like getting back on the horse? Was the chemistry just there automatically in the studio?
Well, the next step was Bob said, "Okay, why don't you guys go out to Phoenix to the Solid Rock Teen Center? They have rehearsal studios and recording studios and everything else there, and just see if you can get it, back together." But like you just said, as soon as we walked in, there was no getting it back together. It was already there, just the same as always. We revert to being high school kids and start ranking on each other, and we all love music and we all really enjoy being together. So the enthusiasm was there from the get-go, and it was off and running.
Yeah. The thing that surprised me about the album is how fresh and vital it sounds. It's like 50 years ago was yesterday. Did you discuss the kind of sound you wanted for the album, or is it just naturally the sum of the parts?
It's naturally the chemistry of us. It's just the way we play. It's not like we said, okay, we've got to play the way we did in the 60s and 70s. That's just how we still play, and hopefully we've gotten better over the years. I think we have. Neal and I can hold a tempo better than we used to. We used to be so excited sometimes it would be off to the races, but no, it was a blast. We had so much fun. Alice was so enthusiastic and excited. uh, and then the next step after that was we had like over 70 songs. We had enough songs to do 5 albums, I think. And I couldn't get an answer out of Bob or Alice. What songs do you guys want to do so I can zero in on them? Nope, nope. Next thing you know, they booked a real studio, Carriage House Studios in Stamford, Connecticut. And Neal and I had recorded there quite often. I even recorded my audio book for my book there. So we were comfortable there. And Bob Ezrin had affiliation with it because when he lived in that town, he kept a lot of his equipment there in exchange for him being able to record there whenever he wanted to, which I don't think he ever took him up on it. But Johnny Montanese runs the studio, so they booked studio time, and I thought we were going to just decide which of these 70 songs we were going to focus on. Uh, but we walked in the studio, and Bob Ezrin walked in all excited. Let's do an album, and we started recording right off the bat.
Yeah. One of the things I love about the album is its typical Bob Ezrin production, where each instrument is punchy and clear. It's not a Spector wall of sound where things blur. It's the sounds are very definite. Would you agree?
Absolutely. That has to do with technology, but that also is a great indication to the brilliance of Bob Ezrin because, we've had albums in the past, Billion Dollar Babies and whatnot. And, Under My Wheels had horn arrangement and we had string arrangements. So on this album, we had a couple of songs that really called for that kind of production. But I kept saying, Bob, we're getting ready to mix this, and we haven't added the sound effects and the orchestration and the bagpipes and everything. And Bob said, Dennis, if we add those, people will be talking about the production. If we don't add them, they'll be talking about how you guys are playing these days. So he was right. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the tracks. Black Mamba features your old friend Robbie Krieger from The Doors. Um,
Right.
was there as much storytelling as recording in the studio?
Well, Robbie did his part after the fact,
Okay.
but it's true. Every time I see Robbie, there's all the L.A. days. We were good friends with the Doors and attended their recording sessions, and they'd come over to our house for parties, all that kind of stuff. But when Robbie read my book, he wrote a nice promotional piece for my book, and he said, from now on, when anybody asks me what the 60s were like, I'm going to tell them to read Dennis's book. Because basically, he said he doesn't remember it at all. So, but how did we choose Robbie? First of all, we were uh, throwing out all kinds of names. Everybody had their favorite guitar players for different tracks, and then we thought it's going to turn into a cameo, and there's no way we're going to include everybody that should be included and all that. So, but Robbie Krieger, we all agreed, was a friend of Glen Buxton's, and Glen Buxton would have played slide spoon guitar on that song. And we said, we got to get Robbie for that. And of course, he hit it out of the park.
Yeah. There are a couple of tributes to Glenn on the album. See You on the Other Side, which uh, finishes the album. Was that always going to end the album?
I'm glad that we decided to end the album with it. The thing is, once we got all of the songs recorded, we had to go back and remember what we had even recorded. We were fast and furious. I mean, we had like 10 days, and Bob Ezrin thought, okay, we're going to see if we can knock out 5 songs. Well, we ended up recording 13 songs or 11 or something like that. Recorded 2 more, actually re-recorded one in Nashville and recorded the I Ain't Done Wrong in Nashville later. But uh, so to get the song order the way it is now was a lot of work. I came up with maybe 50 different possibilities, and then Bob Ezrin thought, well, some of your songs should be later in the album, and then Max from Ear Music jumped in, and he had ideas that kind of went against what I thought was better, but it was it was more like what I had wished we could do. So I think that had a lot to do with Max and Bob Ezrin,
Yeah. Um,
because I would have ended the album with something more epic like Blood on the Sun.
Yeah. The other tribute to Glenn is What Happens to You, which actually features Glenn's guitar parts. Tell me how that came together.
Way back in 1973 at the Gillespie Estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, the band house, it was wee hours of the morning, and Glenn had a riff that he wanted to remember. We had a tape recorder, but couldn't afford tape or didn't have any tape. So I had a cassette machine. So I just turned it on and we just jammed for a couple hours. And I saved that all of these years. I always wanted to finish that song. And now this came up with today's technology where you can clean a tape up and use it. So Bob Ezrin got all excited, said, send it to me, you know. So he cleaned it up and then he added a click track. And when we were in the studio, on the spot, spontaneously, the band wrote a song that we thought Glenn would have approved of that fit that riff. And the riff, Glenn playing the riff is on the song, and he gets a writer's credit. So that worked out perfectly. Not only that, but another friend of ours, Rick Tedesco, plays guitar on the album, and he played Glen Buxton's white SG custom guitar,
Okay.
which Neal and him had restored from a smashed guitar. The story on that, none of us know. It was Glenn's guitar and he smashed it for some reason. But it's been restored and it sounds great. And it's on almost every song on the album.
Yeah. I just, while we've got time, I just wanted to go back and talk about some events in the band's career in the early days. When School's Out came out, and the paper panties were part of the packaging. What are your memories of that time? Because the panties were deemed flammable at some point.
Uh, we we were so lucky. Warner Brothers had turned us down back in the LA days. We had opened for the Mothers of Invention, and they came and saw us and said, "No way, anybody's going to sign, you know, a bunch of transvestites or whatever they thought we were." And so uh, later on, we end up on Warner Brothers, which is great because back then, in our opinion, they were the record company that was the most willing to go out on a limb to do something different with their packaging and with their promotion. So we had built the thing, you know, we had the Killer album, we had the various album covers, which we got to be known as a signature thing to have a cool album cover. Of course, the Beatles set that bar high. So now we decide we're going to, instead of a dust jacket, put pink paper panties, or, well, they were various colors actually. There was green, blue, yellow, and pink. And so instead of a dust jacket, the vinyl record would be in panties. So these were shipped from, I think, Italy. And when they came into the New York City harbor, they were declined entry because you couldn't have paper garments that weren't flame proof, flame retardant. So the ship went back to Italy, which would have been a disaster for most bands or an album. But of course, Shep Gordon and Joe Greenberg, our management, who were every bit as uh, inventive as we were, turned it into this national story about the panties getting uh, uh, re. They couldn't come into the country until they went back, got flame retarded, and then they could come back again.
Another thing I wanted to bring up was Salvador Dali. In '73, he met up with Alice and I believe yourself. Uh, what was your opinion of Salvador Dali at the time?
Well, first of all the way back when Alice was 16 and I was 17, we were in art class in Phoenix, Arizona in high school. And we loved Salvador Dali. And we decided we were going to start a band and incorporate artistic ideas into it. And so all these years later in New York City at the St. Regis Hotel where Dali lived, and I'm going to get a chance to meet him. I was very nervous. And we had a person that worked for us that used to work for Derek Taylor, who promoted the Beatles. And her job was to tell us when we were in a room with a party, to tell us who the record execs were, or the important people that were there, and what we should say to them. So I asked Carolyn, I said, so I'm going to meet Salvador Dali. What do I need to know? And she said, oh, easy. Call him Maestro. I said, yeah, and what? She said, no, that's all you need to know. So I'm sitting in the bar waiting for Dali to show up. And when he comes through the door, he's walking through the room kind of towards me. And I said, Maestro, and his eyes lit up. And all of a sudden, I was his best friend in the world. But I couldn't understand much of what he said because he kept switching languages. And when he would land on English, it would be about flaming giraffes and stuff.
Yeah. Of course, he was famous for creating the hologram of Alice, and with the
Right,
brain that was made of chocolate eclairs, ants, and diamonds. Um,
right.
and I believe you weren't invited to the unveiling.
I was there while they were making it. When Alice was sitting on the turning pedestal with the Tiffany jewelry on, and Dolly was there. I was there while that was being filmed, but I wasn't invited to the big unveiling of it in New York City, which kind of I was a little bit hurt over that. Um, the band had been flown to the next gig or whatever, and then Alice stayed behind to do that. But but still, that was a long time ago, and I did get to meet Dolly. In fact, I met him several times, hung out in his room with Gala and the scientists that did that hologram. Not only that, but I also was at the Guggenheim in New York City at a Dolly exhibit, and I had finished looking at all the paintings, and I was ready to leave, and Dolly showed up, and he was surrounded by an entourage, and of course everybody in the museum swamped him, but he saw me and broke through and came walking toward me, and then his security guy swept him away, but but it was very nice to know that he recognized me and wanted to come over and say hi.
Yeah. One more from the old days, and we'll finish up with the new album again. Um, Neal Smith, I believe, could have ended up in the Vietnam War, but apparently your lead singer put an end to that.
Yeah, they so Neil decided it was a good idea to get a bunch of beer and get a 22 rifle and go out in the Arizona desert and shoot rabbits at night, the night before he had to go down to the draft board. And so him and Alice were laying on the hood of a car that was slowly going down a dirt road in the desert. And I think it was driven by Alice's sister, Nikki, was driving the car. And then Neil he thought he shot a rabbit, but then he quickly handed the rifle to Alice. And then Neil ran down the road to see if he had shot the rabbit. And the gun went off and it hit Neil in the ankle. And they ended up on the way down. Of course, they were going to the hospital, and the police would be there because it's a wound from a rifle. And so Neil told everybody, don't say a word. Don't, I'm going to do all the talking. And so they got there, and Neil got patched up a bit. And then the cop came in and said, so what happened? And Neil was saying, oh, I shot myself. And the cop saying, well, to shoot yourself at that angle with a rifle, that's impossible. And there's no powder burns to show it was close. And the cop looked around the room and looked in the eyes of each person. And when he got to Alice, he said, he did it. But then he said, nope. Okay, so nobody's filing any charges, but next time, shoot yourself in the head. Yeah, that was the attitude between between most of the cowboy mentality in Arizona at the time and long hair.
Yeah. So consequently, Neal got to stay with the band and not go to Vietnam.
Yeah, the next thing that happened is we rolled our equipment truck that was had all of our amps in it, all of Neal's drums, the whole band in the back with mattresses, and we drove all night long from Phoenix, Arizona, going to L.A. And when we were coming into LA on the San Bernardino freeway at the morning rush hour, a car cut us off and the van went tumbling 3 times over with all that equipment jumbling around in there, and we ended up the thing slid upside down and stopped all the traffic for maybe who knows how many miles. And so now Neal's standing out behind the truck. His drums are destroyed. And so Glen Buxton says to Neal, "So how do you like being in the band so far?" And Glen said, first you shoot me, and now you try to kill me in an accident. This is my kind of band."
Our time's quickly running out. Just one more question. What are your hopes and dreams for this album?
Hopes and dreams have been answered. This dream has come true. The album is made. The album is about to come out, and it's a stamp of validation. We've got our legacy back, and so no matter what happens, the dream has already come true as far as this. I just hope people hear about it and that they enjoy it. And so far, the uh, the response is resounding.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, Dennis, it's been fantastic to chat, and we'll catch you next time.
Okay, great. Thank you.